Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by IDate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Hello, BIM thinkers. I'm so glad you made it. I'm so glad I made it. Nobody knows but Carl and Matt that I was actually 10 minutes late to this recording. But they were still there, and they're so nice. So don't tell anybody. If you just tell them to listen to BIMThoughts, but don't tell them I was late, because then I would be sad. But I've got Carl here, Carl Storms himself, the man, the myth, the legend. I probably had to keep the legend in there. Maybe your new nickname.
The legend, I like it.
The legend. And we have Matt Mason from Rand or IMAGINiT, or both. Which one is it these days?
You know, it's both, but the reality is that, you know, Rand is 90% IMAGINiT these days. So
Oh, okay.
Rand is the parent company, but these days IMAGINiT is the big piece of it.
The big piece. And you do the Clarity. You're the himfic in charge of Clarity.
I'm something. That's my baby, and it occupies most of my time throughout the year.
It does. And you answer my emails right away, which makes me happy.
You know, I try.
And you're probably thinking, why did I give this guy my email address?
You know, you haven't abused it too much, and I appreciate
Okay.
Anybody who's that interested in something that that we make. How can you not like that?
That's right. I do like Clarity. It's a lot of fun. I like it because it's all databasey, and I'm into that kind of a thing these days. So Matt, define yourself.
Oh boy, I knew that question was coming, and I wish I had better prepared for it.
Did you? You should have baked a cake.
Well, I mean, I at least jotted down a couple notes, but that doesn't mean I was, happy with, how I wound up defining myself. No, I run the software development group for packaged software here at IMAGINiT, and so I cover the IMAGINiT Clarity product as well as our various IMAGINiT utility products for Revit and Civil 3D and Vault and some other products as well. But right now, IMAGINiT Clarity is our big one, and I also serve as product manager for the product as well because we're still relatively small group. Sure. So I do both sides, development management and product management. And wow. I don't know. I looked at this and I realized I met the 25-year mark for how long I've been doing sort of CAD-oriented development. Yeah.
Wow, you're right up there with Carl.
Yeah, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs.
I started AutoCAD right out of high school. At the EPA is where I started working to do AutoCAD. On 2.17.
Ooh, wow.
Ooh, yeah. That's before AutoLisp.
Yeah.
Because AutoLisp was 2.18. So I was right before that. There was no undo command for me.
There was no forward and straight ahead.
No rotate either.
Just draw in another direction.
Right. And every time you zoomed, it would do a regen. And if we remember regens back in the old DOS days, regens weren't fun, especially on an old machine. Well, it wasn't old when I was doing it. It was a brand new machine, but it still took 10, 15 minutes to do a regen.
Now, come on, Bill. You're talking about the EPA in the 80s. You're saying you had funding for a new machine?
I had a 286.
I don't believe it.
I had an 8 megahertz 286 with a 20 meg hard drive, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. It was a nice machine. I even got it upgraded to a Hercules card. So you said Vault. How is Vault still going strong?
Yeah, I mean, within the the Autodesk manufacturing side of things, it's really the only game in town. That's basically for people who are still, in manufacturing or even civil 3D. I think Vault still
Yes.
does okay in the civil world,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, it's still out there, and it's fairly pervasive, I would say, in Autodesk, manufacturing and civil kinds of accounts.
Yeah, I did a huge Vault implementation. Was one of my last gigs when I was doing consulting, and that was quite fun. But it wasn't even with the manufacturing stuff. It was all with just AutoCAD or Civil 3D
Hmm.
at that time. But with Civil 3D, it was quite cool what you could do with Vault, because it's almost like how work sharing became a thing in Revit. We all remember when work sharing was new. You can do that sort of thing with Vault and Civil 3D with all of your alignments and tins and all that stuff. So, what is new and exciting with the new version of Clarity? Or what is Clarity for those people who don't have clarity on it?
Well, so Clarity is it's an on-premise intranet-oriented tool that helps your firm with task automation, extracting big data out of Revit, model model health for Revit and that kind of thing, and a bunch of other topics that fall into that batch task automation and data extraction kind of areas. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea is it's kind of like having a robotic intern that you can say, this is how we do the PDFs or the AutoCAD exports on this project, and it will redo them for you as many times as you want, all in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You say, schedule this to happen at midnight on Thursdays, and it'll wake up, fire up Revit, open up the models, do the work, deliver the files to where they need to go, and then shut back down and wait for the next thing to do.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We use it at my day job, and we use it for model metrics. We use it for doing PDFs of all the sheets nightly, so people can, so our designers can see what's changed, and they have a current PDF set of their drawings. We also use it for, we also run, I think we're doing Dynamo scripts with it now.
Mhm.
And we are also doing it to automate our backing up of our BIM 360 models.
Yeah, and that's big. I mean, I think it has been big ever since people have been moving to BIM 360. Is
Uh-huh.
firms would like to, for a variety of reasons, have an
Mm-hmm.
on-premise backup just in case.
Right.
And yeah, and that's one of the things that Clarity can automate is that
Yeah.
process of backing up either your live models or your published models down
Mm-hmm.
from BIM 360.
Yeah, so we have it backing it up, and it zips it up in a nice one file for us, and now we have lots of backups of all of our projects. It's wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. And now I hear there's BIM Track integration.
That is true. Yeah, we have an integration with BIM Track, and it helps you with a couple different things. If you want to automate your push of your live Revit models over to BIM Track, you can
Mm-hmm.
schedule that and say, hey, I want to push this every night, or only every night if somebody's made a change that day to the Revit models.
Mm-hmm.
So we can automate the push from Revit to BIM Track, and then we can also automate backing up your BIM Track data. So if you want to have
Oh.
that local backup of your cloud data, so that things like all the issues, all the models, everything
Mm-hmm.
that you have going in that BIM Track project, and keep a local backup of it, you can schedule that to happen automatically.
Cool. So tell us all about that, Carl, because you know something about BIM Track, I think.
I know one or two things about BIM Track. I'm
Uh-huh.
learning as I go. Thanks for the gleaming endorsement there, Bill. Um,
Anytime, anytime.
it's actually funny that Matt mentioned that, because we came across a client today. We were talking about BIM Track and the idea that within the the native tool, we can schedule things like being able to export the IFCs, but it's really just based off the IFC exporter from inside of Revit. One of the things that Matt mentioned there by taking advantage of the Clarity integration is the fact that there's a little more intelligence in the back end of Clarity to know that it doesn't have to fire up and push that model if nothing's been done to it today or tomorrow or the next day. So then it just understands the process that today someone went in and opened this model, so there may have been some changes, so now we'll do it. So it's not firing up and spitting out the model if not needed. And this particular client had a very large project with lots of models, and they were concerned about having this project set up with spitting out, I think it was 20 or 30 different models at a time, and how that all would work out, how we'd have to go through the process and make sure that all the different things were timed. Well, that goes away with Clarity because it understands what's been open and what hasn't. So you don't have to push all 30 models if nothing's happened in those models. So that's one of the cool things about that.
I think the other thing that's interesting is that we can kind of divide up that work. So when you fire off a job that might have 20 models, it'll split that out into 20 different tasks, and you can have that divided across one or more machines to do all the pieces of that work. You can even do, if your machines are hardy enough hardware-wise to open up a couple copies of Revit at the same time, you can run multiple tasks in parallel, but ultimately divide the work and get everything done faster by having multiple machines ready to go.
Divide and conquer. I like it.
Divide and conquer. Yeah, because we have 8 task servers, and they're busy all the time.
You just bragging now, Bill? Is that what's going on here?
Kind of.
It's a flex.
Flex. Yeah. My task server is bigger than your task server.
Nice. I like it.
Nice.
Speaking of big and new and wonderful, Clarity 2021. What new and exciting stuff can we expect, Matt?
Well, I mean, so the new stuff is we've got some stuff around integrations. So we're integrating with not just BIM Track, but also Procore and Google Drive and those kinds of things to be able to push data over to them. We've got some nicer BIM 360 integration, just because everybody in the world is now BIM 360 centric, and then we've also got some nice stuff on the model health and model metrics side of things, where we can calculate model scores and sort of draw your attention to models that have a score that's less than a setting that you put in place. So everything gets scored on a 0 to 100 scale based on rules that you put in place, and if your project has models that are failing based on whatever you define as failing, you get a little dumpster fire kind of icon next to your project to draw your attention to the fact that you might have some model quality problems. We're also starting something interesting with letting people opt in to publishing their model health data anonymously to the cloud. And we're starting the process of collecting that data. But what we anticipate that we'll be able to do with it is, if you opt in to share your data anonymously, you'll be able to look at your model health data compared to other firms' model health data and say, am I normal? Is this what we're seeing here? Is this typical across the industry, or across models that are architecture models, for example? And that's something that we're excited to kind of see how that develops, to give people a broader view beyond their own firm of what's normal and typical in terms of model health and performance and those kinds of things.
Yeah, we're excited about that too. We're gonna be opting in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's a great thing, because once people get over the fear of sharing, it's really one of those things where everyone in the AEC community is going to benefit from that. We're sort of helping everybody up, because if you think your models are great, and then when you put it aside many other models and realize that maybe they're not that great, might open some eyes and improve model quality across the industry, which would be nice. There's still some pretty shabby models out there.
Well, I'm hoping for the other way with us, that our models are just perfect.
You want to be with your big servers and you want to be on top of the heap.
Right. We want to say, yes, our models are the best in the industry,
Hey,
and there's nobody better.
put yourself in for a raise. Look at this chart and graph.
Hey, there you go.
Anything else new and exciting in the world?
Well, let's see. What else do we have? We are on the model health side. We're also trying to get into not just the measuring sort of what we kind of term as symptoms, like how many Revit warnings do you have and that kind of thing. But we've added some features to start tracking outcomes. Model events where we see a model that has encountered corruption or a crash or just kind of a slowdown. If a user reports a slowdown, where we can record those kinds of model events and put those in as a backdrop to how the model metrics have changed over time, because we think that BIM coordinators sort of have a gut feeling based on their experience of having too many Revit warnings or exploding file size or that kind of thing correlates roughly to when they've seen crashes or corruption or other kinds of problems. But we feel like it's really been kind of anecdotal over time, and we're hoping that by bringing a more data-focused mechanism to report these kinds of things, that we'll be able to both visually and eventually through machine learning be able to say more definitively that you're sort of in the danger zone based on what other people have seen and what you've seen yourself in terms of what kinds of symptoms precipitate bad things happening from the model.
So are you saying that the Revit user themselves can mark their model as being slow or something, or
Yes,
okay?
It is both.
How does that happen?
Well, it's either through the web interface or through the Clarity client add-in for Revit. You can just sort of report a model event, which is a crash, slowness, other weird behavior, I think we term it, model corruption, and then you can report it through the web, the Revit add-in, or the task server. If the task server is processing things and it sees it, then it should be able to report it as well.
Cool. One of the challenges we have with Clarity is with all those darn dialog boxes that pop up.
Yes, well, I mean, the Revit API has some mechanisms for suppressing dialog boxes, and but they're dependent on Autodesk developers themselves, actually following the rules on things, and not all areas of Revit follow the rules. So, for example, if you've ever seen the pop-up dialog that says that something is more than 20 kilometers from the origin, for example, that's
Right.
a dialog box that the Revit API can't suppress. And so we've got go ahead.
The one I've noticed the most is constraints, not satisfied, or whatever the constraints error is. That's the one I see the most when I log into our task servers to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yeah, we've got a multi-pronged sort of strategy to suppress dialog boxes and keep things moving. Yeah, we have to, because we're a batch-oriented tool, and if your Revit is hung up waiting for somebody to press the OK button or the close or the whatever the error action is inside of Revit, then that's not good. So we've got people working on that on an ongoing basis, but every day we find not every day, but we find more all the time.
You find more all the time. Does the metrics that you do for open time, is that affected by those kinds of dialogues, or?
I believe that I think if there were cases where the dialog box, if we couldn't dismiss it, then yes, it would be affected, at least in the case of Revit warnings or error pop-ups. But I think we're in the latest version. I think we're doing okay at those. It's more the sort of oddball, kind of pop-ups. Navisworks export has a
Oh,
has a
okay.
pop-up, that 20-kilometer thing, sort of
Mm-hmm.
oddball things. We get an occasional message about schemas that are
Huh.
that are unhappy. So those kinds of things. But yeah, it is something that we do worry about. And I think it was actually Nick from your office that suggested that we should try to detect the fact that there's some dialog box that we can't close,
Mm-hmm.
and basically put a limit on the file open thing. And so I think we do have some kind of detection of the fact that we
Mm-hmm.
did a file open, but there's a dialog box that we can't actually suppress, and to sort of throw out the file open time on those kinds of scenarios.
Okay. And then shame on me for not knowing this question, but I do most of only the back end stuff in Clarity. Um, does it warn the Clarity administrator when a dialog box is popped up and it can't do anything in the job?
I don't think it does directly. It's our intention that that's never going to be the case, but
Right.
obviously there are some. I think how you might experience it as an administrator is something where it would report your task. There's some kind of limit as to how long each task should take. And if your task takes longer than some amount of time, whatever you have it set for, it'll send you a message saying that this task has been in progress for too long, and we think there's something wrong with it. So I think that's how it would report it. So it's not specifically about the dialog box per se, but it's any
Yeah.
time that your task
The
is
task didn't complete or
within an hour or 2 hours or whatever you
yeah.
set that to.
I think we have them timing out after a while. I don't remember what we have it set to.
Yep.
Yeah. So it'd be nice to have that pop up like on the on wish listing here. But that's okay. I got the guy. Um to have it pop up on the main project page,
Yeah.
like where you have your dumpster fire.
Mhm.
That could be almost a dumpster fire, but not quite. Just sort of like a wastebasket fire or
Little screenshot of the error message that's holding you up or something. Yeah.
or just toasty marshmallow fire.
Marshmallows. There you go.
Yeah,
S'mores.
yeah. S'mores. Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I've got this break when Bill takes a breath. It's hard to get a word in edgewise once he gets going.
You're welcome.
When you were talking, Matt, about the idea of having people opt in for the big data and sort of having it through machine learning starting to learn when there might be those issues, does that get us a little bit closer to having clarity through something like machine learning start to actually fix those things? You mentioned a lot of warnings. So there's simple warnings where they're something that it learns. The administrator goes in and deletes these things on a certain thing. Are we getting close to maybe having it go beyond just reporting the actions or the issues and starting to correct them?
I think we're probably a long way from that, and I say that based on um, a long history of doing model quality kind of software for Revit and that kind of thing, where um, just making changes probably needs a human in most cases. There's just not too many cases where you would want a, um, a machine to decide how the fix should be made, unless the fix is really 100% clear. And in most cases, things are just not 100% clear. If you talked about identical instances or something, on top of each other, that's a warning, but there's at least scenarios where that might be intentional and desirable and that kind of thing. And so you wouldn't want it to necessarily delete one to make that go away, or if there was more than one, which one do you delete? And what counts as identical. So I think it's always going to involve a designer, at least for the reasonably foreseeable future.
And I guess that makes sense. I mean, from what you said there, it doesn't sound like we're necessarily at a spot where it's not feasible. It's more to the idea that there may be different people that have different ways to fix that issue. The instance where we come into play that there's two for a reason, when in the past the two means it's a mistake.
Yeah.
But perhaps there's a happy medium there, where over time, and again we'll go back to the warning because there's usually lots of warnings where we can fix that. The administrator can say, when we reach this thing, it just sort of pops up. Would you like me to correct, delete these 75 instances of whatever? They validate, click the button, and then they don't have to actually do the work, but they validate that that's what they want it to do before it actually goes to the action, which I guess is what a task processor does. But
Yeah, but I think actually, I mean, a task processor. So maybe it's just not necessarily a job for Clarity, because Clarity is really sort of a batch-oriented tool where it happens in the background. But it might be a good tool for like the Autodesk Model Checker, as an example, where it's really meant as more of an interactive tool where it could say, I found these 75 issues, and I think this is the fix, but if you want to validate it, then I can do it for you. Because the issue is, in most cases, or a lot of cases, the issue is fixable via the API. It's really a matter of, are you willing to have the software do it for you and accept, whatever the consequences are of doing it that way.
fair
Right. And then
enough.
you've got the liability too of that.
Yeah.
Stinking
Yeah. So
liability.
we're
Well, I
not
mean,
signing up for the
somebody's got
liability part.
right. Somebody's got to take the blame.
Under
So
advice of counsel,
under the advice of counsel.
we are not going to implement that feature.
That's right.
And certainly not in a batch mode without
Right.
somebody looking at it.
Yeah, auto clean.
One button, it's all gone.
One
No more
button, it's
problems.
gone.
Yeah.
We make change orders happen.
So you mentioned Matt, the API there. You also mentioned earlier when you were talking about sort of your time in the industry and the things that you've done working with programming in general. I see that you spent time outside of the AEC world doing some automotive and aerospace stuff.
Yeah.
I know it was earlier on, but what do you see the big difference between that type of sort of manufacturing and repetitive environment versus the wild, wild west of the AEC?
Well, I mean, I think that I mean, some of it is just the different nature of AEC projects versus manufacturers and how they work and how they fund projects. I mean, the reality of AEC is that every project has its own funding and is a little bit more of a one-off. And so, at least back when I was doing more of the manufacturing side, there was sort of more ability to invest in changing, how the products got made through automation of CAD, that kind of thing. And it was just, I think, just how they funded those kinds of enhancements or how they budgeted or looked for those enhancements was different in manufacturing than in AEC, where everything sort of has to find a project budget to go against in a lot of cases.
Well, that and you're making the same thing a few hundred or 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So as you make 10 or 12 or 25 or however many hopefully they discover a better, faster, cheaper way to make them.
And they can leverage what they develop on those, on the rest of their projects for the future.
Right.
It's harder in the AEC world.
It's a lot harder in the AEC world, I would think. I'm sure there's some things that AEC world has figured out how to do better and stuff like that, but there's so many new things in AEC, I would think, over manufacturing.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I would say that in the early days, manufacturing, sort of got out ahead and figured a lot of stuff out. But certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, AEC has done a lot of great catch up to have things that were really specific to their domain. I think on the manufacturing side, one of the challenges is that that manufacturing is so broad that it's hard sometimes for them to develop tools that that help every kind of firm, because you could be designing a a vacuum cleaner or a Barbie doll or a Boeing jet or something like that, all with the same software. Whereas Revit is got a fairly well-defined domain and fairly
Right.
well-defined objects within the domain and that kind of thing. So I think that's really helped AEC accelerate over the past.
Yeah, it's different. And when we used to go to these conferences, hopefully we'll go to them again soon. The big thing on the keynotes was needing to build all these buildings by real soon or whatever it was before we ran out of room for the amount of people coming into this world. And so I think the AEC can learn a lot from manufacturing in how they do things repetitively to create those kinds of buildings. And hopefully that stuff they learn on that they can move to the one-off buildings that we're doing today with all the great designs that we're doing. But what do I know?
Lots, Bill, lots.
I'm just a podcaster in a podcasting world.
So another question we heard earlier on, Matt, you had mentioned, or I read somewhere, you've been working with the Revit API since Revit 8.1. I went into Google's, and that was August 2005. So it's been, we'll say, 15 years you've been inside the Revit API. What's
You're
the
making me feel
weirdest?
old, Carl.
You and me both. What's the weirdest thing you've encountered?
Carl. Oh, wait, sorry.
No.
I tried to answer that for
The weirdest thing I've encountered. Well, I mean,
Weird, quirky.
weird, quirky. I mean, there's all sorts of, certainly there's all sorts of things that you discover as you're trying to diagnose stuff, and you wind up hunting down like what's going on inside of Revit in journal files or that kind of thing, right? To try to understand why something doesn't work. And so, buried inside of journal files, you see like, notes from one developer to another, like I told you that this would that this would happen sometime, or something like that. Let's see, weird or quirky. I mean, there's times in the Revit API where between releases they've switched like the meaning of a setting. Like, there's something I can't remember. It's something about DWG exports where they switched like whether something meant yes or no. They like switched the meaning of it in the middle of or like in one release, maybe 2015, they changed it from this means yes to this means no, and trying to figure out why things are turning out differently.
Right. And so their documentation changes to double negatives.
Yeah, or something like that, or it
or
should
how
change
group
to double
policies are like group policies in Windows, where you have to really read them to understand if I should do a enable or disabled. So enable deletion of something, or where the enable is not the intuitive choice, but it's the correct choice.
Yeah.
Those of you who haven't been in group policies, you don't know what you're missing. It's a wonder.
I will continue to not know what I'm missing.
Okay, good. You haven't played with group policies in Windows?
I have, but I don't want to,
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't want anybody to know that I have either. So.
Oh, okay. All right. I understand. Any final thoughts? We're past an Aubin.
No, hey, I appreciate the the chance to come on and chat with you guys. It's been a while since I've seen you without a built conference to to run into.
Yeah, Built or Autodesk University.
Yeah.
But now it's all going to be virtual this year.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting, I think.
It'll be different.
It'll be different.
Bill, I've been appreciating your YouTube channel. I watched you
Good. Read the
restore.
factory manual. Yeah.
I watched you restore Carl's car the other day. You strike me like you're. I can't decide. Are you like the Gulliver's Travels of like car maintenance? You're like a giant car mechanic, or there's something I can't quite put my finger on.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at there.
I'm trying to get the Bob Ross vibe going. but I just can't. I can't. I guess I need to get some mushrooms or something to get that going. But
You need the afro. You need the afro. That's
I
what's
need the
missing.
fro. Yes, I
Yeah.
need the afro.
Well, and, you had friendly trees, so maybe you need a little, bit of
Yeah.
entourage or landscape, stuff, around
Yeah.
your
Happy
workplace.
tires.
There you go.
Carl, any final thoughts?
No, I think I'm all good. Thanks again for coming on, Matt. Learned some great stuff about the new Clarity 2021.
Yes, exciting.
All right, my
Excited
pleasure.
to play with it. Oh, and I can make a new server this year for it too,
Yeah,
because we still have 2016 projects, believe it or not.
yeah. I mean, so right now we're supporting so Clarity 2021 will support back through Revit 2018 with full support and Revit 2017 with limited support. So
Uh-huh.
so yeah, so if you still need 2016 support, you kind of have to keep your Clarity, your older version of Clarity going as
Yeah.
well.
So we'll have to call you to help us.
Give us a call.
Have somebody help us, because we'll have to transfer all the projects to the new server, and then go through and delete all the 2016s off the new server, and vice versa.
Yep, no, I think that should be
Thinking
doable.
out loud. Yeah, it should be easy.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun to me.
Yes, it's going to be exciting. All right. Thank you so much, Matt.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Carl. I learned a lot, and I hope you guys learned a lot too. So join us next time when Carl says,